When I set up Diversity in Luxury, nobody had ever heard of me. So I started reaching out. I just did what I do as a headhunter. I called, I emailed, and I would say 99% of people didn't want to know who I was. And that's fine. Everybody wants to pitch at people. But unfortunately, we've been trained elevator pitch, 30 seconds. And then we have this I'm blah, 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 blah. And all you do here is the I. And how are you today? What's been the best part of your day? What have you done that's made you excited today? That's how you develop and nurture and build relationships. And then you can start breaking in to an industry.
Today, I have a woman that is speaking about luxury, and who doesn't love luxury? And it is so apropos because if you're following the Olympics or not, because this is recorded, so it might be a couple of weeks ago, for the first time, I believe Louis Vuitton, the French luxury brand, is actually a sponsor of the Olympics. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to Elizabeth Solaru. And she is the multi-award winning founder of Elizabeth's Cake Emporium. And yet before that, she was known for being a microbiologist, I believe. So we have a really interesting journey to discuss with Elizabeth. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm so excited to be here, and I can't wait for us to dive into our conversation.
Great. So, Elizabeth, you have an incredible background as an artisan cake maker, which just blows my mind. Entrepreneur. You help people start and build successful luxury brands. You're a keynote speaker. You are a microbiologist and a headhunter. And it's absolutely amazing. So I am sure there's a common thread that runs through all of those businesses, which is beyond me. But before we go there, I would like for you to share with us something that most people, really most people, don't know about you, and how it has influenced your overall success.
That's a very good question. Gosh, that is a really good question. Okay. I've got a few things that people don't know about me. Because sometimes we present a public face and then we've got the private face.
Sometimes, for most people, it's most time.
But for me, I think in my past, there's been a bit of trauma. I never ever talk about it. I've had a bit of trauma. I was married. I got divorced. I lost children. Miscarriages, a stillbirth, a live birth. Children unfortunately survived. So there's been a lot of trauma. So that's one thing. And that's really given me a sense of urgency about what I do, because I kind of think to myself, life is too short. Because with all that trauma, I nearly died myself. And if not for the fact that I was a microbiologist, I literally would have been.
Would you mind telling us about that?
Yes.
Childbirth?
Yes, it was. And I think people don't realize this, and I certainly didn't, because for the most part, many women get pregnant, have a baby, yay, have a baby. But there's, people don't understand that it is quite life-threatening. It's not a disease, but it really does.
For the record, Elizabeth, you're speaking to someone that also had I have 4 children. My oldest were twins. I had a very traumatic pregnancy. I almost died. They almost died. To your point, you hear about the people that go out to the fields, deliver a baby, and go back to the fields. But it is a real physical trauma to the body. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. And so what had happened? Long story made short. Had the baby. She lived a few hours. She died, and then I did not feel
Is it
right.
full term?
Not full term, almost, about 30 something weeks.
A baby, though. You delivered a real.
Yeah, it was a baby. Oh gosh, a baby.
Yeah.
And what then happened after that? I didn't feel right. I raised my concerns. They said, oh, it's because you're grieving, dismissed me. And then I woke up in the middle of the night and I knew I was dying. So I had to call, because thankfully I worked in a hospital. So I then called, and I knew a colleague of mine was on call. So at 2:00 in the morning, I called the hospital where I got switchboard to beep her to say, please wake up our overall boss, our consultant, and let her know that if I die, these people are responsible. So my overall boss, she was a ferocious woman, one of my favorite people. She literally woke up the whole hospital where I was, and I had all these people running into my room, and they realized that some of my lab tests were not recorded properly on the system, or they didn't even look at them. They did not. So I was truly dying of septicemia, and thankfully, I got
blood. That's
a blood poisoning.
For the people that don't know. Yeah.
For people that don't know, that's literally blood poisoning. I had an infection, which had now gone to full-blown blood poisoning. And for some weird reason, one of the junior doctors had prescribed antibiotics that were not even prescribed in that hospital ever. And I don't know why he prescribed that antibiotic. So that antibiotic was ineffective. So I had to be on intravenous, very powerful antibiotics, etc. So that's how. So when I recovered from that, it kind of just made me realize that life is so short and I just need to do everything I want to do. So I just thought to myself, if I don't do it now, who knows when I'll ever do it. So that's why I'm kind of driven to do what I do and to make a difference. So, so that's me in a nutshell.
Wow. So you talked about the switchboard. So you're unless that's a British term, you're going back years.
Oh, absolutely. Oh my goodness. This is way
so young for the people that are just listening. Elizabeth looks really young.
This is way before social media, way before. Oh my goodness. Was it way before the World Wide Web? Possibly. Possibly. I'm talking about the 90s here. I'm talking about the mid 90s to give you an idea.
Everything, it was in its infancy, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. So after that horrific event, and thank God you survived, and you say you knew as a microbiologist, I would challenge it and say, I think you just knew as a woman. But the being the microbiology connection to the person on call, that was clutch. Another day I'll share my story with you with my twins. So it's interesting, you don't realize that you need an obstetrician until you need an obstetrician. Like you hear about these people would love to tell me, oh, I didn't even know I was pregnant with twins. I went into the hospital and voila. I'm like, well, good for you. Goody for you. Because that wasn't my situation. So at that point, when you went in to give birth, you were working as a microbiologist, correct?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
Yes.
And do you get your doctorate in that in England? Like, how does the schooling work?
Right. We have a slightly different system. We all get a general practitioner, a GP. So that's a general practitioner. So if you say you've got the flu, you got, minor ailments or something you feel, so you go to your GP. Even if it's something a bit more serious, your GP then refers you to a hospital, because we have the National Health Service, which is essentially free at the point of delivery. We don't pay.
Kind of, not really, but go ahead. Yeah.
So we have the National Health Service, and you only pay for prescriptions. Some people get help with payment for their prescriptions if they're not working or if they're chronically ill, etc. But for the most part, you only literally pay for prescriptions. So there might be a massive waiting list for certain specialties, but for the most part, health is free at the point of delivery. So you get a referral from your general practitioner,
which is a medical doctor.
Which is a medical doctor. Yeah. A medical. And more like your family. You know, in the old days, I don't know, in America, there was a family doctor. Certainly from watching Little House on the Prairie, you had the doctor doing the rounds. So your GP is similar to that. So a family doctor, that just a generalist, but then they then refer you according to whatever ailment you present with, if it's serious enough. So you get referred to another doctor in a hospital.
Okay. So who would refer to a microbiologist? What would be the issues?
Okay. So with so in a hospital, you will have the microbiology department, you will have the hematology department, all the pathology disciplines. Each one will have their own department. So with microbiology, the job was to process samples. So your bloods, your bodily fluids, anything that could be infected is referred to the microbiology department. We process the samples, we get the results, we interpret the results based on whatever the medical history is. So that is, in a nutshell, is what microbiology does.
Okay. And how long did you do that for?
Oh, I did that for, oh my God, from the late 80s to 2001.
Oh, a long time.
A long time, yes. A long time. So to about 2001, yeah. To about 2001.
So we'll get back to your story, but I just want to ask you this question because I was listening to a podcast and I found this so interesting. And the woman said, the physician said that, don't quote me on the number, but we are becoming increasingly specialized in medicine, certainly in the States, but I think it's around the world. And she said something like, we have something like 359 specialties in medicine, and all people are doing is getting sicker.
I can believe that. I can certainly believe that, because what's happening, and this is actually a similarity between medicine and the luxury business world.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Because we're now having niches within niches. So it's not enough to just have, so for example, microbiology as a niche, or as a discipline. You can have virology, you can have bacteriology, you can have mycology, which is, virus, bacteria, fungus, you can have parasites. So by the time you break it down, you can have several disciplines within so you're niching within the niches, if that makes sense. Same thing in the luxury.
Well, hang on 1 second though. Explain to the listeners why that contributes to us getting sicker as opposed to better. I mean, I have a sense, but I could be totally wrong.
Yeah. To be honest with you, us getting sicker is, multifactorial. So
I understand. Yeah.
So you have environment, society, our food, I'm going to say it again, our food, then our water, even, again, when you opened, you spoke about the Olympics. I was reading just before I came on that all the competitors that swam in the River Seine, they're all sick.
Are they now? I cannot.
They're now sick. And some of them have had to withdraw. So again, I keep saying this, our water, from bacteria to microplastics to, again, all sorts of things. Then you've got the psychological as well.
Yes.
And then us staring at screens all day, that causes a lot of sedentary and again, this is just me. Your muscles can, when you're not using your muscles properly and all you're doing is staring at the screen, you've got your eyes, you've got blue light, just so many theories out there as to why we are getting sicker. But what's then happening is that different sicknesses will give rise to different disciplines in medicine, if that makes sense. So illnesses that we never had 100 years ago will suddenly either because people died at an earlier age, or so right now, because again people living longer, even that's contributing to another genre of medicine, because the longer you live, the more problems are discovered. It's like an old house. The longer, you discover more problems. It needs rewiring, it needs replumbing, it needs this, it needs that. So that's my theory anyway for
and on the other end of that spectrum to what you're saying, And I'll say this because, you're a Brit, we're American, but
Yeah.
most people tend to follow the royal family. People are getting cancer younger and younger. Hence,
Yes.
Princess.
Yes.
I don't know
Absolutely.
her right title, but yeah, it's
The Princess of Wales,
yes.
Her Royal Highness, Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Yes. Again, I'm not. I don't want to delve too much into it, but I have my.
No, but my point is, people are just they're living longer and being sick, and they're younger and
Yeah.
getting sicker. I was just using that as an example.
Oh gosh.
Full
And
disclaimer:
also,
we don't have any inside information onto anything.
exactly.
Yeah.
And also certain cancers that in theory, show up later
Right.
and now showing up earlier. They're
Okay.
showing up earlier. Our stressful lives. There's a lot more stress now, a lot more expectation, a lot more this, a lot more that. I feel, and again, this is just me,
Yep.
it all has an impact on the body, holding all that stress. And then let's talk about relationships. Relationships are not what they were. Again, in the old days, yes, I know people might sneer at small towns. If you came from a small town, yes, everybody knew your business. Yes, people didn't mind their business, but there was a sense of community.
Yeah.
And there was a sense of people helping to a certain
belonging.
belonging.
We have a loneliness epidemic.
A loneliness epidemic. So again, we can go on and on and on. So we all know the reasons why certain things are happening. Even now, relationship experts and doctors, etc., are now making the connection between loneliness and certain diseases.
Sure.
Loneliness and certain. So that's what I feel.
Sure. I mean, people have said for a long time, you can die from a broken heart, and we can show the science behind that. Okay. So thank you for sharing all of that. So make that great segue. So you get out of the hospital, you're like, life is too short. So after all that training, all that education, it is a long road to become a physician and to become a specialist. How did you pivot to get to where you are? Because I know it didn't go right into luxury brands, or did it?
No, it didn't. I did a pivot. I went back because I did what I knew to do, how to do best. I went back and did an MBA, went to business school because I thought I don't want to be in the lab all my life. I really want to do something different, but I didn't understand what different. I just knew it had to be something in business. So I went to a business school. I got an MBA and then networked a ton. And I met someone who started his own headhunting firm, and I joined the firm. I was thrown in the deep end, recruiting chief executives, chairman, C-suite executives. And it was fun. I really, really enjoyed it. And again, for me, it was about relationships. It was about people.
Or relationships.
And I was literally a matchmaker. So all I did was find the right candidate for the right company, and boom. But the one thing I noticed was that some companies and candidates really overvalued themselves. Some undervalued.
It's a nice way of saying it.
and some undervalued themselves. But the ones who treated themselves as a luxury brand, so they had a personal brand that was distinct to what they did as a job, but the ones who really treated themselves as a luxury brand, I found that they were the ones who got the jobs. For example,
hey, Elizabeth, I'm going to interrupt you. Yeah. So, because I've worked with so many headhunters, to operationalize, when you say somebody that treats themselves, defines themselves as a luxury brand, how does that show up and how does that differentiate? Because that's true at the C-suite and any other level, right? You have to find a way to differentiate yourself. So how does that show up?
Okay. So they applied certain principles that you would in luxury. Exclusivity. So they won't spray and pray. They're not going to send their CV to every headhunter. So
how do you know that? How do you know that they don't?
Let me come to that. Okay. So, obviously you can only go by what they tell you. However, we all talk to each other. So if a role comes up, and this is how we know, because many candidates like that do not actively apply for the role, they tend to get approached. So that's because the ones you want for that job, because when we get a client come to us to say, we want you to get us the right candidate, and we would ask the client, we would say, is there anybody out there that you have your eye on? And they would say, yes. He's the CEO of XYZ, and I've heard through the grapevine, he's not moving. So my job as a headhunter my challenge could be, okay, let me see if I can sweet talk him and get him to move. Let me see what I can do. So you will approach. So that's
a good point, because I'm coaching two CEOs now that were approached that way. And I was working with them to say, okay, stay or go. And it's a very interesting process, but you're right. You want to be the one that's hunted.
Exactly. And that's why, again, I'm called a headhunter, because that's what I do. On the other hand, even if now it's not always me approaching. Sometimes they make their approach, but the savvy ones, the way they make their approach is not, there's a job opening. Here's my CV. They never do that. What they do is they'll call me and have a conversation, and they'll say, Elizabeth, would you meet me for lunch or a drink, or let's just have a chat? So they're sussing out the opportunity, and I'm sussing them out as well. So then they don't put their hat in the ring at the first go. So,
relationship building.
Exactly. And there's a little bit of a dance, a little bit of a back and forth. So there's me saying, oh, this will be a great opportunity for you. There's them saying, it looks interesting, but I don't know. Tell me more. Or it could be that they're trying to persuade me that they're actually the right person for the job, because it does happen the other way round. And I might say, well, you've only managed, a company of 250 people. This is 1,000. So we have that dance. And then they go away, they think about it. Again, it goes to the rarity, it goes to the exclusivity, and it goes to making themselves sought after. And then they know that I'm going to go into the market and ask certain people about them. So they would have prepped people, they would have done a bit of due diligence to do that. And sometimes if they know people in the company that I'm representing, they would make discreet, very, very discreet. I get to hear about it, but in a discreet way, they would make some inquiries. They would say, okay, I know you've got a headhunter involved and blah, 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 blah. And realistically, what are my chances? Because they will not never knowingly apply for a job blind or cold. So that's what I was trying to say about people who treat themselves as a luxury brand.
Right. That's great. And also, if for the people listening, nobody's coming across as desperate, right? It's a mutual relationship where you're both going to add value. This is what I bring to the table, and what will you bring to the table? So that's really great advice. And I would suggest that, and for all the listeners, even if you are an entrepreneur, you can take an aspect of that when you're providing a service or trying to get a client, find a way to differentiate yourself, right? And the older you get, the easier it is to do, because you're bringing wisdom to the table, which is a whole different conversation. Okay, so you become a headhunter. How long did you do that for? Which is a terrible term, but go ahead.
I did that for another 7-8 years.
An exhausting profession. I mean, I find that would be exhausting.
It was 18-hour days. It was a lot of travel, a lot of pitching, a lot of interviewing, because as you're interviewing for one role, you need to be pitching for another role. It was a lot of reports. So we had to write reports. And I was very fortunate to work with firms that gave proper feedback. So the way I was trained, you take your notes during the interview, and when you give your feedback to the candidate, you literally feed back question by question. So no generic, oh my goodness, it was very close. Next time, do better. No, we never did any of that. It was literally question by question, You gave your feedback. This is the question. This is what you said. This is what we were looking for. So that way they went back with real substance. And for the most part, my candidates anyway, they always said he helped them get the next job. Because at the end of the day, if 5 people apply for a job, only one's going to get it, and you've got to check back to the 4.
Right.
So I did that for.
So interestingly enough, recruiters will hire me when they place an executive, because I can help them be successful transitioning into the role. So quite frankly, so they don't get the clawback.
Yeah. That's the thing. Again, any candidate that treats themselves as a luxury brand will make sure that they have a transitional coach or
An executive coach.
An executive coach, definitely, to help them in that, because the first 90, they're going to be defined by the first 90 days. So the first 90 days will define their executiveship or whatever it is they're doing. So they need to make sure that those 90 days, I liken it as a plant, being, when you're being transplanted into a new soil. This new soil can be too rich or too poor, but a coach will help you adjust the soil, adjust to the soil. So that's how I see it. So again, that, very important aspect. So did that, but because it was so stressful as a role, I started doing something I had done when I was a child, and that was baking. So I started baking. And I would bring the treats to work, and everybody would say, "Oh my God, this is amazing. You need to do this full time. They're so good, etc." But then I thought, cake making, it doesn't really pay the bills. And then 2008, massive
crash,
massive collapse. And then I thought to myself, milestone birthday. If I don't do it now, I'll never do it.
What was the milestone birthday?
I'm not going to say at this point, but you can guess. But I say to people, I was over 40 when I started my business.
Okay, close enough.
Yeah.
Close enough.
Yeah. So I'm well over 40 when I started my business, and and what I did was the same principles that I applied to the headhunting role. We were expected to make 100 cold calls every week. 100, not emails, calls, because we needed to get meetings with chief executives and chairman to.
So you're calling the executives, you're not calling the company.
We're calling the executives, yes.
Did you have to get through the executive assistant, or this was all they pick up? Yeah, the gatekeeper. Yeah.
Absolutely. I specialize in getting through about 3 of them, because the level of chief exec we were calling, probably, I don't know, £500,000 or £1 billion budget. And they would normally have at least 2 executive assistants. So one will be in charge of the diary, and one will be in charge of everything else.
Right. So the diary, you mean schedule?
Exactly, the schedule. Yes. The schedule. So obviously you had to get to know who was in charge of the scheduling, and that was the most important person in your life. So again, is getting through. Once you get a hold of them and you can get through to them, they are usually the first to know if their boss is looking for another job.
Absolutely. They know everything.
So the moment you call and they're very keen to get you in, you have a sense of, okay, urgency. Boss is keen to leave. So those are some of the things in terms of relationship building that proved to be absolutely important in doing the job. So to start my baking business, I took the yellow pages again. This was...
Well, hang on one second. You said when you brought, and of course this is old school because you were going into the office. Now a lot of recruiting firms, it's remote, but yes. Except the big ones still have the offices. But you said, people said, "Oh, you should do this, for a living full time." And you said, "Oh, you can't pay your bills." What was the mindset shift, the transition? Because you've already now transitioned to taking the principles from recruiting to the cake business. So when did you decide I can make this a business?
I don't think there was ever that conscious decision. I just had to, because we're talking
2008. Yeah. Okay.
2008. I had to eat. There was no, let me see if I can. No. It was like, it had to work.
It's interesting because it's interesting, Elizabeth, because a lot of food businesses were started during COVID. A lot. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely can believe that. And even the existing food businesses, they then transition into deliveries. They
Right.
then, yeah. So, so I just started, and I took the yellow pages and I called every party planner
Mm.
in that book. But this was the one, a call that really changed my life. So I called, and the person at the other end, very young girl, she said, "Do you make cupcakes?" And I said, "Of course I make cupcakes." And I said, and I had a line, which I tended to use when I was a headhunter, which was, "I'm going to be in your area in 3 days. Would you like me to bring some samples for you?"
What was the start? What? I'm going to be in your area
I'm
in
going
3
to be in
days,
your area in the
whether
next.
you were or not.
Yeah, without, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because as a headhunter, once you get an opening, you can't say, "Oh, let's
No.
get the diary out." No.
Time was of the essence.
Yeah, you've got to chase. So I was like, "Oh, I'm going to be in your area in the next 3 days." And the 3 days is to give me a time
Time to make.
to make them, and also to get some pretty boxes and etc. So I'm going to be
And to ask the person that picked up the food, what's your favorite flavor? Favorite flavor. Yeah.
Exactly. You get it. Yeah. So I then deliver the samples. And another thing I tended to do, I will be like, "Delivery from Elizabeth," and then I'll run. I never stayed around to chat, because you can make or break, or they can either like you or not like you, but at least I wanted it to give them the opportunity to like the cakes before they
also built up curiosity.
Exactly. So I was chief pot washer, delivery girl, and then I left. And then I got a phone call, and it was, "Lady Elizabeth would like to see you." And I'm like, "Who's Lady Elizabeth?" But so I went back, and it so happened that Lady Elizabeth Anson is the late Queen Elizabeth's cousin.
Okay.
The only one to call her by her name. Cousin, and this lady,
But the only one to call whom by her name? Queen Elizabeth by her name?
the late Queen Elizabeth, because they were cousins. They were very close. They were cousins. And I went back, and it happened that she was a party planner. So that was her company. She's the party planner, the first party planner in the UK, I believe. And she said, "Absolutely love the cakes. Tasted delicious. We'd like to place an order for cupcakes with you." So that was how I got my first.
What was the first order?
It was 250 cupcakes. It was 250 cupcakes.
What was the occasion?
It was for a young lady's sweet 16, and she hired 3 cake makers, and I was cake maker number 3, but they just wanted cupcakes from me.
Got it.
Because she'd been looking for the right cake maker, couldn't find one. And then with that phone call, I just happened to, and that's how I started working with her.
So with that, so then from there you got referrals. So Lady Elizabeth brought you into the
yes, it was. She brought me into the fold, but she did something which really changed the trajectory of my business, and that was, she wrote me a note, a testimonial. And in that note, she said, "You can use this note on all your marketing material." And that was the most gracious thing ever. And that was huge. Because
especially in London.
Especially in the UK, even abroad, because again, she was party planner to other royal families around the world. So her endorsement was everything.
So for the listeners, the power of testimonials, it doesn't have to be even at that level, but the power of testimonials. And I know for me, when I wrote my first book, Not Tonight, Dear, I've Got a Business to Run, Enrich Your Marriage While Prospering in Your Business. And it talks about how to create balance in your life and your personal life and your business. And it's not a false choice. Barbara Corcoran wrote the testimonial. And when she wrote it, she said, "Market the crap out of this," because she knew that would give it credibility. Great. Yep.
Oh, absolutely. And I love what you said about Barbara Corcoran, because they know, I love it. I honestly love it, because they know the power of their own
brand.
brand and also their stamp of approval.
Absolutely.
They know it's everything. And I love when people then use that to help somebody like me, because I was a relative newbie. I was an unknown. I had no royal connections whatsoever. So
Yeah.
for somebody of that stature to do that,
Yeah.
that for me, and I've always said everywhere I always acknowledge, Lord rest her soul.
Did you ever meet her in person?
Yes. I met her that day when I went
Oh.
back, and I've met her since. And she never, and this is one great thing about her, no matter how long she's seen you, she'll start talking to you as we just get the conversation from the last time, as if that time hadn't passed at all. We just start again. So
I'm just curious, why would someone from the royal family want to do that party planning? She clearly doesn't need the business. I mean,
this is where you see, I'm glad you asked that question, because I'm glad you asked that question because people have an impression of the royal family. They're rich, they're this, they're that, they're the other. You may be a member of that family, but that doesn't mean you may be asset rich, but cash poor. I'm not suggesting that she was.
No, I understand.
But this is something I've actually studied. I've studied the different types of luxury clients, and I've actually written a book about it. It's going to come out in September. And in that book, I explain that, yes, they may have a powerful family name, they may have estates, etc., but cash is always king. Yep. So we don't know their financials. We make assumptions and we project our views onto them, but we don't know their reality.
Well, the truth of the matter is what you're saying is interesting, because you talk to anybody that works with their money, accountants, when people get divorced, they say, you have no idea how much money somebody has or doesn't have. And for us in the States, of course, we don't have royalty. For us, had a little revolution there, but for us in the States, people will even tell you, financial people say, it's not what somebody makes, it's what they keep. So that's a really good point.
Yes, just to jump in again, she herself has actually said she had to work, and she started is working at 21. Her first party was organizing debutante balls, and she charged.
Well, she certainly had a golden Rolodex, right? So
exactly. Yeah. So that's my point. So so for me, what I'm trying to emphasize is she, as a businesswoman, her ability to make use of her network, to spot new talent, to recognize rising stars, to develop and nurture talent, was extraordinary. And she didn't have to, because she could easily go to established people and because some people, they just want to buy from people they perceive as the best, but she has a knack for nurturing talent.
Okay, so let's pivot totally to you. So talk about how, and I totally get those principles, and I'll give you a moment to unabashedly promote your book. Unabashedly first, Elizabeth. So how would somebody today try to break into the luxury brand, right? You have Louis Vuitton, you have Chanel, you have Gucci, you have all of that. So, and yet, things are impossible until somebody does it, right? Apple, just Steve Jobs created a product nobody even knew they needed. Now we can't live without it. So how would you suggest to entrepreneurs they do that, or provide something that somebody might not know they need?
That's a brilliant question, and people are doing it every day. So I say to people, it depends on if you have money or if you don't have money. I certainly didn't have any money when I did break through. So if you don't have money, you need to be able to talk to people, reach out to people, and you need to be so thick-skinned that you accept rejection. So I'll give an example, and this is currently happening right now to me. So yes, I know I have the cake business, but I set up another business called Diversity in Luxury. And what it's about, and it's not diversity the way some people think it is. For me, it was about bringing together, say, for example, a tech company, maybe in China, who does amazing stuff in the luxury world, but nobody's ever heard of them. So for me, it was a celebration.
Nobody's ever heard of them outside of China or at all?
Outside of, even outside of, say, even within the luxury industry, some people might not even know what they do. So the company powering, for example, or the purchases of Louis Vuitton. I'll give an example. There was a needlecraft school I discovered in India, and this needlecraft school, they do embroidery for Dior and Hermes, but nobody's ever heard of them.
Got it.
But nobody's ever. So for me, I love discovering unusual people doing unusual things within luxury. So, or a mainstream person doing something incredible. So for example, Chief Executive of Chanel, when she was appointed in 2022, her first act as chief exec was to increase the funding for the education of girls in their charity. They have a charity called Fondation Chanel, and she increased that charity pot from 20 million euros to 100 million euros. So how many chief execs do you know come in and go, actually, we're going to spend more money on charity? Not many. So, so that for me is an unusual.
Leave it to the girls.
Exactly. So that's an unusual thing for someone to do and because I'm an ex-headhunter, that really interested me. So I created something called Diversity in Luxury to discover unusual people like that. And back to the point of how do you break through? So when I set up Diversity in Luxury, nobody had ever heard of me. So I started reaching out. I just did what I do as a headhunter. I called, I emailed, I linked with people on LinkedIn. And I would say 99% of people didn't want to know who I was. And that's fine. But then you get the one person who starts, who responds. And other things you can do, you can literally, there's one person you're targeting. And again, I say all this in my book. You find out what you can about them, but you don't ask the usual question of, because everybody wants to pitch at people. So for example, if I meet Barbara Corcoran, the last thing I would suggest people do is start pitching her. Oh my God, I have this product, because she gets pitched all the time. With a bit of research. And again, maybe my scientist background, I will research someone. If I'm interested, I will get to know what makes them tick. What are they?
Interrupt you. I'll give you an example for Barbara Corcoran. She has a child that has either ADD or a learning disability. Yeah. That's what you would talk to someone about.
Exactly. Because I'm going to say to people, health, you can talk to any, because they say, oh my God, how do I talk to someone? Network was, I'm like, health is universal. So you can talk to someone and it's safe to talk about. You can talk about health and you can talk about relationships.
Find out if they have children, find out what their children's interests are.
Exactly.
And make something of value, to your point. Got it.
Exactly. So health and relationships. But unfortunately, we've been trained elevator pitch, 30 seconds. And then we have this I'm blah, 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 blah. And all you do here is the I. And there is no, and how are you today? And what's been the best part of your day? What have you done that's made you excited today? That's how you develop and nurture and build relationships. And then you can start breaking in to an industry. So the luxury industry, more so than any other industry, it's about relationships. It's about, because if you want someone to spend a huge amount of money with you, you need to be able to develop those relationships. But some people, you don't develop the relationships with them. You develop the relationships with the gatekeepers, because some people are very much security conscious. They need to be safe. It's all about safety. Some people, they want to get to know you on a one-to-one. Some people, they don't want to know you, but they want to know so much about what you do.
Right.
So it's like some of these people that want to get to know the creative director of a brand, because to them, this creative director is the artisan. You have people who they would spend a lot of money just so they can have a chef's table, so they can be near the kitchen.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I'm going to interrupt you just because I want to be, I'm aware of the time. I will just challenge you a little bit. on when you said luxury brand more than anything is relationships. I think everything's real. I've worked with all different companies. Doesn't matter what it is. I don't think it's more or less. It's all relationships. What you're saying that is of so valuable to people is you don't go in for the kill right away. And, if you really need to talk to A, you best maybe find out about the B, C's, and D's in their life or their world. And I totally get that. Okay. Unabashedly talk about your book, promote it, send people to where you would like them to find out about it, to purchase it, and then anywhere where they can get in touch with you. Just talk about Elizabeth and her business.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for that. I've written a book called The Luxe-preneur, so play on words. And it's about how to start and build a luxury brand, especially when you're starting from zero, i.e. no money, no connections. And what I've done is I've literally looked at it from 2 points of view. So I've looked at it from the point of view as you as a luxury brand owner. So your personality, I've developed about 9 different archetypes that I've come across in my experience of the luxury world. But more importantly, I've also looked at the different types of luxury clients, because many luxury books they're written by academics, they're written by professors of luxury, very heavy. But I developed 8 different.
By the way, have never created a luxury brand, but go ahead. Yeah. That's the problem with academics running economies. Yeah.
I love that. So I developed 8 different archetypes. We've spoken about 2 or 3 during the course of this conversation. I've definitely spoken about 3, and you get to know what makes them tick, how to approach them, how to develop relationships with them, and more importantly, how to get them to buy and why they buy. Because at the end of the day, if you don't know why people do what they do, you are selling in vain. So, and also, I say to people, it all starts with you. You mentioned earlier about selling a product that people don't even think they need. It starts with you. So, for example, my archetype is the artisan. As an artisan, all I want to do is create. I don't keep an eye on money. I don't care about how long it takes me or what I need to do to make sure this is perfect. Mm-hmm. And that has its advantages and that has its drawbacks. So I also talk about the type of people I need to work with to make sure I have a viable business. Likewise, when it comes to luxury clients, the different types, and I use examples. So I use celebrity examples so that people can understand what I'm trying to say. And they think, this celebrity, so this is why they're XYZ. So the book for me is everything I've learned over the last 20 years about luxury business, about brand building when it comes to luxury. Because people say luxury is different. It is different and it isn't different, if that makes sense. There are aspects that are different. I think sometimes the language of luxury, the codes, the rules, sometimes those are created not to help people, but sometimes to confuse people. Sometimes to confuse, and also there's sometimes a little bit of gatekeeping in the luxury business world. But with what I'm doing, I'm like, I just break it down and I make it easily digestible. So that's the book in a nutshell.
And where would you like people to get it?
People can get it from Amazon. It'll be released in September and people can get it from Amazon. It's called The Luxe-preneur. I'll send you the full name. So you can add that to the notes. And also, I would love to hear from anyone. So I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best place for me. Elizabeth Solaru, spelled as it sounds. So if you want to get
Solaru, just in case people miss it with the British accent.
With the British accent. Thank you so much. And so I'm on LinkedIn. And I love to continue this conversation because I think it's just fascinating.
Great. Okay. So I lied. I have I have two more questions for you. What is the one song that you can't live without?
Oh, that's a good one. Oh my goodness. Oh, I tell you which one it is, and I know it might be unusual. It's Jolene.
Oh, from Dolly Parton.
That's correct. Because to me, you asked the question at the beginning, is there one person that she is such a massive influence because she's written over 3,000 songs. I love, she's the most astute businesswoman. She refused for Elvis Presley to sing one of her songs because he wanted all the rights to the song, and she walked away. She said no. She also
incredibly grounded. She goes grocery shopping when she gets home from work.
But more importantly, she gives out books. Anyone who gives out books, she gives books. She has a library. She has she also, for any high school student in her hometown that graduates, she gives them money. So she is someone that is doing so. I mean, we all need to be like Dolly. Yeah. I think she is just one of the best people in my view, in the world. And if we had more like her, there'll be world peace. So
are you a country music fan?
I'm a closet country music fan. I tell you what I like though. I like bluegrass.
Okay.
I like So there's country, she left me and I'm crying in my truck.
I love my dog. I love my gun.
You
so can take my wife. Yeah.
There's that. But I love the deep, deep country, almost spiritual bluegrass.
Yes.
Love that.
Very American. It's a very American genre.
Yeah, but I believe it's very there's an honesty and there's a spirituality about it. So that's why I love that genre. I love all kinds of music, to be honest with you. I have no shame when it comes to music. I love everything from disco, pop, classical music, reggae, whatever. But I do love bluegrass music in particular.
Okay, so Elizabeth, we will end on that note because music is the universal language. It brings everybody together. If the world listened to more music, I think the world would be a much better place. And that concludes today's podcast episode of Dr. Patty Ann's podcast. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being a guest today. This was absolutely incredible and so different. And the world needs more Elizabeth Solarus as well.